All right, aspirants, welcome. Today we're diving into a really critical topic for your mains exam. What is India's game plan in a world where global trade rules are being torn up and rewritten? Let's get right into it.
First things first, let's lock in the most important keyword for your essays, VUCA. It stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. This is the perfect term to describe the chaos of global trade right now, where the old, predictable system is basically gone. Dropping this word in an answer immediately signals to the examiner that you get the big picture, that you understand the deep instability we're dealing with.
So here's our game plan for this session. First, we'll set the scene with this new era of trade. Then we'll get into the specific strategies, the playbooks of the US, EU, and China. After that, we'll lay out India's three-pillar response and the challenges we face, before wrapping it all up with a super clean summary of all the key takeaways you'll need for revision. All right, Section 1, a new era of trade. The main thing to grasp here is that the game has fundamentally changed, and it's the big powers who are rewriting the rules to suit themselves. The irony here is pretty staggering. The very same countries that built the global trade system, the US, the EU, and China, are now the ones taking a sledgehammer to it. The WTO is being ignored, and we've moved from a system based on rules to one based on pure power. It's no longer about playing by the book. It's about who has the muscle to use market access and production as weapons. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. Section 2 is all about the specific playbooks that these major powers are using. You've got to understand their game if you're going to figure out ours. First up, the United States. Their strategy isn't exactly subtle. It's direct, it's aggressive, and it really boils down to turning two major economic tools into weapons: tariffs and energy. So let's break these two weapons down. On one hand, you have massive tariffs, like the Liberation Day ones, that just flat out broke WTO rules. On the other hand, you have energy politics, where the US is twisting arms trying to get countries like India to buy their oil instead of cheaper Russian crude. And here's the kicker, the part you should definitely use for some critical analysis. The US is doing all this while it's still a net oil importer itself, with a $60 billion deficit. And if you're wondering if this stuff has a real impact, just look at this number, negative 37%. That is a massive, staggering drop in India's exports to the US in just 4 months. This isn't just theory. It's the kind of hard data that shows the real-world consequences of these policies, and it's a perfect data point to quote in your answers.
Okay, so if the US playbook is a sledgehammer, the EU's is more like a surgeon's scalpel. Their strategy is way more subtle, but believe me, it's just as effective. They're wrapping up protectionism in a green flag, using environmental regulations as trade barriers.
Now here is some jargon you absolutely have to know. CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. It sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. Think of it as a carbon tax at the border. If you're exporting something like steel from India to Europe, they're going to slap a tax on it based on its carbon footprint. They call it a climate measure, but for us, it's a major new trade barrier, pure and simple. And it doesn't just stop at carbon. There's also the EUDR, the EU Deforestation Regulation. This targets things like our coffee, leather, and palm oil exports. Suddenly, our exporters have to go through a massive bureaucratic headache to prove their products aren't connected to deforestation. It's another huge hurdle, a classic non-tariff barrier dressed up in green clothing. And the effect is already hitting us, hard. Look at this. Even before these taxes are fully in place, our steel and aluminum exports to Europe have already dropped by 24%. Just imagine what happens when the real taxes kick in. So for your exam, here's a super simple mnemonic to remember these EU rules. Just think CD, C for CBAM, and D for deforestation. CD, easy. All right, we've covered the US and the EU. Now for the third giant in the room, China. China's playbook is built on something else entirely. Just sheer raw power. Unmatched manufacturing dominance, coupled with a chokehold on the world's most critical resources. It's really a 1-2 punch. Punch 1 is their state-subsidized manufacturing machine. They just flood global markets with cheap goods, solar panels, electric cars, you name it, and drive foreign factories out of business. Punch 2, and this might be even more critical, is their control over the ingredients. They refine around 70% of the world's rare earths, the stuff you need for all modern technology. And you guessed it, they have shown they are more than willing to turn off that tap for political leverage. To really wrap your head around the scale of this dominance, just look at this chart. 50 million. That's how many vehicles China can produce in a single year. That is 5 times the capacity of the United States. It's enough to meet more than half of the entire planet's demand for cars. That's not just competition. That's an industrial tsunami that can wipe out entire industries in other countries.
So, in this hostile, chaotic VUCA world, with all these power plays going on, what's India supposed to do? What's our move? Well, the answer, and this is the absolute heart of what you need for your exam answers, is a clear 3-pillar strategy. And here they are. Pillar number 1, we have to strengthen our own domestic manufacturing. There's just no way around it. Pillar number 2, we have to safeguard our strategic autonomy so we aren't forced to pick a side in these global squabbles. And pillar number 3, we've got to secure our critical supply chains so nobody can hold them hostage against us. And of course, we need a simple way to remember this for the exam. Just think of the word mass, M-A-S. M for manufacturing strength, A for autonomy, and S for supply chain security. Remember mass for India's strategic playbook. But look, having a strategy on paper is one thing. Actually making it happen is the real test. So for Section 4, let's talk about the path to self-reliance, which means we have to be brutally honest about the big hurdles we're facing right here at home.
And this right here, this slide gets to the absolute root of our challenge. Our producers are basically starting a race 100 meters behind the starting line. They're facing costs that are up to 25% higher than their Chinese competitors. Why? Because of things like expensive power, costly credit, and import duties on raw materials. It all adds up, and it makes competing on a global stage incredibly difficult. And what is the result of that 25% cost disadvantage? It's this number, $100 billion trade deficit with China. Let that sink in for a second. This isn't just a statistic. It's a giant flashing red light. It's the bill that comes due when you have these deep-seated competitiveness issues. This is another one of those critical data points you need to quote. So, what's the action plan? Well, here it is. We have to bring down those domestic production costs. We need to help our key industries build massive scale. And crucially, we need to attract more anchor investments. Think about what Suzuki did for our auto industry, or what Apple is doing now for smartphones. They create entire ecosystems. And of course, at the same time, we have to find new trade partners and be tough when we're negotiating deals. Okay, let's bring it all home. We're at our final section, the exam key takeaways. Think of this as your comprehensive cheat sheet with every key fact, concept, and data point we've discussed, all in one place. Let's do a final rapid recap. The core concept, we're in a VUCA world. The playbooks. The US uses tariffs and energy, hitting our exports by 37%. The EU uses green rules. Remember our CD mnemonic for CBAM and EUDR, causing a 24% hit. China uses its massive manufacturing dominance, like that 50 million car capacity and its control of 70% of rare earths. Now, India's challenge, that 25% cost disadvantage, leading to a $100 billion trade deficit with China. And our strategic answer, the MES framework, manufacturing, autonomy, and supply chains. So the final goal, the ultimate takeaway is this. In this new world of power-based trade, India's strength won't come from picking a side. It will come from achieving true self-reliance, built on a truly competitive domestic manufacturing base. Master these points, and you'll be well prepared.